how was this study conducted and what were the key findings from this study?
Great question, Jordan. And we were very pleased to work with the Contact Lens Institute on this work, which was a collaborative effort between Lyndon and myself and an academic economist, Ash Morgan. He's actually my brother and based in the United States. And the way we went about this was to work with 20 optometrists across the US and find from them financial and other commercial information about what had happened with recently presenting contact lens wearers in terms of the products that they purchased, the professional fees that they acquired, and the equivalents in terms of cost of goods and that sort of information. And we compared recent contact lens wearers with recent spectacle wearers. We, in fact, looked at the data from all of these patients over the previous 4 years. And in total, the 20 optometrists provided information about 600 of their patients. So it's a pretty substantial piece of work. And I guess the headline, the main findings, were that contact lens wearers are inherently significantly more profitable to the practice than the equivalent spectacle wearers. So this is new information. This work has not been conducted for many, many years. And so we think this is quite a profound data set that we're now reporting to our colleagues in the field.
And I think, Phil, this is the first time this has been done in North America. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, there was a similar sort of project done in Europe, but actually only just after the turn of the century. So we're talking sort of 25 years since this was done, and that was in Europe. We don't think this has been done in North America and in the US in particular at all. So interestingly, the overall findings were largely similar between these two studies, despite different geographies and a big difference in time frame. So yeah, it's fantastic that we've been able to do this in the United States.
So seeing that this was, as you had mentioned, the first of a study of its kind in the US, was there anything particularly shocking about these study results, seeing that there's not really that baseline, that this is, setting that ground for that work? What was shocking, and what could practitioners take away from this research?
As you say, we didn't really know exactly what we might expect, but certainly some of the results were startling. The level of increase of profitability was particularly marked for spherical contact lens wearers and toric contact lens wearers compared with their spectacle wearing equivalents. The numbers actually were an increase of 79% and 86% respectively. So that's increase in profitability for those two groups. The level of increase for multifocal contact lens wearers, and here, of course, we're comparing that group to progressive spectacle lens wearers. The increase there was 29%, so certainly an increase, although a smaller one. So some of those just absolute numbers seem to me to be very noteworthy, certainly.
Yeah, and in terms of the sort of impact and the importance of this for the profession, as Phil said, it's not been done in North America before, and I think maybe a bunch of practitioners may well think, you know what, it's a bit of a pain fitting contact lenses. We're not, people come in lots of times, they're seen much too often, compared with a spectacle wearer who comes in, has an eye exam, hopefully purchases a pair of spectacles and disappears off. So that was why it was important that we actually tracked that profitability over a 4-year time frame, because that gave us information about just how much the clinicians actually interacted with the practice and interacted with the clinicians, and looked at the long-term profitability as opposed to one single time that they came into the practice. One of the other things of interest for me, and we didn't actually track that in our study, but it has been shown in other studies, is not only are we seeing increases in profitability numerically, but what about the difference in terms of the kind of numbers of people that might be referred in, so friends and colleagues, into a practice? It's been shown in other studies that people who are contact lens wearers are more likely to refer family and friends into a practice because they have a better working relationship, a better relationship with the practice, front office staff and whatever. So, that's another angle. So you put those two things together, numerically, they bring in more money, plus they're more likely to be referring people into the practice. And certainly I think that the big takeaway for me here is that actually contact lenses are a really good way of building your business. So, if you want to grow your business, actually using contact lenses is a really good way of doing it. And I think we're able to show that with this data.
So on a similar note, if you have any tips or tricks for a practitioner on combating dropout or finding different options for patients who maybe in the past have had issues with comfortability in contact lenses, where is the opportunity to be able to build that profitability in those patients that struggle with those issues?
Well, I think what the study has found here is that there is this slightly hidden benefit of contact lenses in terms of their commercial opportunity for the practice. As somebody buying spectacles, there's a sort of an immediate hit. There's an immediate adrenaline rush as that sort of money hits the cash register. With contact lenses, often it can be a bit more of a slow burn. They're signing onto a scheme or they're paying a small amount of money each month over the longer term. But overall, as we've reported, the levels of profitability appear to be increased with contact lens wearers. So I think that's really important. And therefore, in terms of dropouts and discontinuation, should give hopefully a little bit more encouragement to practitioners seeking to manage patients who have dropped out or potentially may drop out. I think the literature there is quite clear. There's a number of important nuggets I think we potentially could share about discontinuations. One is that often this is due in the early stages to issues around handling, in addition to vision and comfort. So the handling in the early stages are really important. We know that patients who eventually do drop out, half of them have done so in the first 2 months. So keeping close to these patients in the early weeks of contact lens wear, actually proactively calling them up, sending them an email or a message, is, I think, quite important in those early stages to unearth any problems that they might be having. Because any optometrist will know, actually, there are some obvious steps to take if somebody's struggling with lens handling. They just need to come back for an extra training session. Or indeed, if they've got issues with their vision, the lens power might need to be modified. In the longer term, discomfort appears to be the number one reason for contact lens discontinuation. And I think my top tip for that is to address the issue of contact lens comfort at each follow-up visit. Ask about it. How is the vision? How is the comfort with your contact lenses? And if patients are not saying, "Oh, it's really good," or I never think about it, if they're a little bit hesitant in that question, or their report on a scale, they're reporting, just a 6 or 7 out of 10, then that needs addressing. Alternative product may need to be required, or some other management strategy needs to be brought into place, because we know that people who complain about discomfort may discontinue, and actually a great majority of those who will eventually discontinue do not return to their optometrist to ask about this. About 80%, in fact, do not return for further clinical advice. They just drop out, they just disappear. So hopefully this work supports the idea that contact lenses are literally very valuable financially, as well as also commercially or clinically. And so taking these steps to minimize discontinuation will have numerous benefits to the practice, including from a business sense.
So Phil there talked about keeping people in contact lenses and stopping them dropping out. We've got really good data from a number of different papers published now that people who have already dropped out, so people who were wearing contact lenses and are now spectacle wearers, they're very interested, or many of them are very interested in getting back into contact lenses. And with the modern lens designs and materials and modalities that we now have, a number of papers have shown that if you take dropouts, whether they're spheres, torics or multifocals, with modern lenses, you can actually quite successfully get a big portion of those people back into lenses. And given these numerical value numbers, again, that's worth doing. So if you've got patients attending your practice who are previous contact lens wearers and they suffer discomfort or vision issues, modern lenses can often solve that, and there's a really good reason to make that offer to them.
So there is also quite a bit of difference in the type of contact lens patient in terms of profitability. Like the sphere contact lens patient, 79% more profitable compared to, toric is 86% and multifocal was the 29%. Do we have any indication of why that may be? Is there an unmet need for sphere contact lens patients, or do we not have enough information to theorize?
Right now, Jordana, at this point, and because it's a fantastic question you've asked, we've got a lot of data that we're still looking at to try and address exactly the question that you asked. But yes, you're right that the uplift with multifocal lenses, although again, it is a positive uplift, it's moving in the right direction for contact lenses, is not as high as for those other lens types, which might relate to the fees that the optometrist is charging. Maybe it could be higher, or the cost of goods is relatively high for those lenses compared with the sales price. Something in there, I think, is the answer. But right now, we don't have the answer to that exact question, I don't think, but it will be coming soon.
On a similar note, what other research, besides what you had previous mentioned, seeing that, this has laid the groundwork for other research and studies on profitability, what else would you like to see in the coming years in terms of what we know of profitability?
Well, one of the things that was really interesting, because and Phil chatted to quite a few of these practitioners about the data as it was being collected, is that the clinicians actually said, you know what, I haven't actually done this. I've never done this before. They're not close enough to those numbers. And Phil, I think you had some interesting conversations with clinicians that again might be one of the takeaways from this study.
Yeah, we did find that a number of the optometrists report this has actually been quite interesting for them. They're busy clinical people. They don't always have the time to be delving deeply into paperwork and spreadsheets and clinical record systems to get hold of this data. It was only because we asked them to do it that they did so. And I think they found it quite an enlightening process, some of them, that it actually had revealed to them information that was not obvious, or that they didn't know. So in terms of the future, I think it would be very interesting if it were possible to make that process more straightforward for more optometrists. Not immediately clear how that might be done, but I think having optometrists understand better some of the business realities of the products they're prescribing and the clinical services that they're offering, I think would be great. Exactly what that would be, how we might do it, what it would require, not immediately sure, but something like that I think would be very valuable for our profession.